Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. So I was reading a really interesting column the other day in the San Diego Union Tribune by a guy named Neil Centuria, and basically the headline was, "Why Entrepreneurs Should Read the Obituaries." Well, with a headline like that, who would not read it? So the argument basically says, let me quote to you, the argument is that reading about people's lives, mostly semi-famous lives, which is what newspapers cover both nationally and locally, will inform your own life in various and significantly meaningful ways. The lives chosen to be written about are picked because those lives have helped shape the tale of their times. They are iconic in some way, and when they were born and when they died. The arc of their personal history adds to the fabric of our society during that time. Now, the sad truth is newspapers don't run obituaries like they used to. Newspapers used to routinely run obituaries for pretty much everybody who died in a community, but not anymore. These days, unless you're somebody who's famous or semi-famous, you got to pay for it. And a eulogy and an obituary are very different kinds of things. Now, Centuria's point really is that the coverage of the tech sector, which is what he writes apparently about a lot, amounts to what he calls bloviated crap. Love that. Bloviated crap that comes to us every day about the successes and the fundings and the small actions of the current crop of actors on the stage, but the play never ends and new replacement actors arrive. It's only in the obits that you have the chance to see both the compression of a life as well as the mountains of that person scaled. You only get a snapshot, but it's indelible. It forces you to pause and consider. It does not ask you to measure yourself against the person, but rather to find a place to stand for a moment and contemplate. It gives you perspective. I think he's got a really good point there, and not just, by the way, for entrepreneurs or people in the tech sector. I read the obituaries all the time, and not just because, to quote the old joke, I want to make sure I'm not in there. You get to a certain age, and that's what you do, but that's not why. I find the stories that they tell in a really well-written obit, they're fascinating, because they give you not just the dates and the places and the times, but they give you a sense of the person. And perspective is good. I mean, perspective is great because it allows you to consider, I think, sometimes how little you've accomplished, how much you've accomplished. And even though you're not supposed to be measuring yourself directly against that person, it does give you a sense of whether or not you're wasting your time or you're using your time well. Listen, lives have expiration dates. We have to use our time. We can't waste our time. Now, I do want to tell you a quick story from when I started out in the newspaper business, because I started out writing obits. That's the first thing I did when I got to the Rockland Journal-News back in 1978. So it may have been the first or the second night that I was there. I was working the overnight desk, and I had written a couple of obituaries. And I was, pretty proud of it. I was new to the business. I've never taken a journalism class in my life. I thought I was doing okay. So I turn in the obits, and they go in the paper, and that's great. And then the next morning, I'm still on the desk. I'm still working. And the editor of the newspaper comes in. His name was Bill Channon. And he comes in, and he grabs the paper, which has just been published, and he did what he always did. He went into his office. I think he lit a cigar, because you could do it inside in those days. Put his feet up and peruse the newspaper. Now, suddenly I heard this really loud voice from in his office. "Coop!" he yells. Well, I hadn't been there very long, but I knew enough to know this wasn't a good thing. So I sort of walked over to his office and got in there, and he closed the door, and he tosses the newspaper at me. And there's my obit, and he says, "Read the first paragraph." So I did. I picked up the newspaper, and it said something like this. "John Smith of Nanuet, New York, died yesterday of natural causes. He was 62. What'd I do wrong? He goes, "Here's the deal." He goes, "Nobody dies of natural causes at age 62. You're a reporter. It's your job to find out why they died and put it in the newspaper and write about it. Natural causes, age 62, they don't go together. I never want to see that again. The only time you're ever allowed to use the words natural causes are if they're older than 80. Then it's natural. Before that, find out why they died." And that was a great lesson. Talk about perspective. It was a great lesson because he taught me that thing you just don't accept, right? You don't just do the obvious. Sometimes you have to dig down a little bit. You'll always question. You always go beyond the obvious because that's what gives you perspective. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this morning. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.